Welcome to Journey to S4HANA, the podcast that covers everything related to SAP implementations. This podcast is not affiliated with SAP and covers the realistic truth behind S4HANA, Ariba, and SuccessFactors ERP implementation success. Whether you're new to the world of SAP, an existing ECC, or R3 customer, a multinational team, or a mid-sized organization, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Welcome to episode number 2 of Journey to S4HANA. This is the podcast that covers everything you need to know to make your S4HANA implementation successful. In this podcast, we bring on experts and practitioners and consultants and people in the SAP space, including customers of SAP, to talk about what some of their lessons learned and what are the things that other organizations need to know as they embark on their S4HANA implementations. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their S4HANA implementations, as well as other types of technologies as part of their digital transformations. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions. And if you'd like to learn more about sponsorship opportunities on this podcast or other podcasts produced by Major Tom Productions, please feel free to reach out to Mindy at our team. And I've included her contact information in the description field below. So be sure to check that out if you're interested. With me as today's co-host, as always, is Darian Fiakuski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Good to have you. And we've got a great show. I'm excited for today's topics and guests. Our main topic today is going to be keys to S4HANA implementation success. What are the things that you need to do to be successful in your implementation? We're going to bring on Dave Beldyk as a guest here in just a moment to talk about that. And Dave Beldyk is a senior manager on the Third Stage Consulting team. He's been in the SAP space for a long time. He's helped a lot of clients, as has the rest of our team, helped a lot of clients through S4HANA implementations. He's got a lot of good battle scars and wounds. And just like me and Darian here, we're all independent. We're not affiliated with SAP, so we're not here to sugarcoat anything. We're here just to tell you the reality of what we experience with customers that are going through S4HANA implementation. So excited to have him on the show here later today. But before we jump in, or before we bring Dave on the show, you've got some social media related questions from TikTok that you want to get to here today, Darian.
Yeah, so we have some fun questions today. Eric recently had a TikTok video go a little bit viral about SAP and the US Navy implementation and why it failed. So Eric, if you can give us a little bit of background on that topic before we show the video, that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually, I know which TikTok video you're talking about. It's a clip or a segment from a longer form video that I posted to YouTube. So on YouTube, I've got I think it's about a 12 or 15 minute case study around the U.S. Navy. And the U.S. Navy has been trying to implement SAP now for years, and they've had a lot of trouble with it, a lot of problems and a lot of hiccups along the way. We won't get into every single problem they had here in today's discussion, so we'll cover some of it. But if you're interested, we'll play you a clip from the video via TikTok here in just a moment. But if you're interested, you can check out my YouTube channel and just search up U.S. Navy. You can just search up U.S. Navy SAP Eric Kimberling on YouTube. You'll find that video if you want to see the full video. But that's a little bit of context, as I like to do case studies on SAP failures because there's so much you can learn from it. And we do a lot of project recovery work as a company. So we go in and help teams that have failed in their S4HANA implementations. We'll help them get it back on track. And then in some extreme cases, we also do expert witness work where there's a lawsuit involving S4HANA, and we'll go in and analyze and testify what happened and what went wrong. So there's a lot of good lessons that you get from these sorts of failures. And so that's really the premise of why we wanted to cover that here today, and sort of the premise behind the video too. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and roll the clip, and then we'll discuss it here and share some of the comments and questions we got from this video on TikTok. Essentially what the Navy was trying to do, in the U.S. Navy, was to consolidate all of its legacy systems onto a single platform of SAP. And they started the project by doing 4 different pilots. So in other words, they used SAP on 4 different pilots or test or beta sites and beta implementations of the software, but they did it in 4 different parts of the organization. And during that pilot phase, they spent close to $1 billion when they realized that they were operating in silos and they had 4 totally different implementations happening that didn't have any sort of collaboration or coordination between them. So they shifted gears at that point and said they wanted to stop with the 4 pilots and instead go to a single ERP involving SAP across the entire organization. So that's the clip of from TikTok, the one that went viral, Darian. And when you say it went viral, I'm assuming you meant it got dozens of views on TikTok, right? Because everyone's going to TikTok for S4HANA advice, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, a few thousand, let's say that. Yeah, for sure.
A few
But we
thousand.
had a couple questions. Yeah.
So people aren't just going to TikTok to watch, people dance or to learn about music. They can also go to TikTok to learn about S4HANA too. And who knew? I bet a lot of people listening didn't know that.
Yeah, who knew? Crazy concepts now.
Yep.
But we had some good questions actually coming up on that from TikTok. I think there was a little bit of confusion that some people had when you were mentioning how when the failure is in beta form, the software is in beta, I think you said, how could that actually be a failure? I think they were a little bit confused on how could a software that's in beta become a failure, if you want to maybe expand on that comment.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I don't know that I've had that question before, but and just to clarify, when you watch the full-length video, I explain in more detail what I meant by beta or sort of the pilot implementation of the software. And what that means is I wasn't suggesting that S4HANA itself as a product was the beta version of the software. I was suggesting the way the Navy implemented SAP was a pilot implementation. So just to back up, generally what happens is organizations will pick a location or a part of the organization to go live first as sort of a way to test out the software and get feedback and adjust and pivot however they need to. It's also a good way to mitigate risk, so you don't put the entire organization at risk for the entire implementation all at once. So that's what I mean by pilot, location, beta, whatever you want to call it. Now, pilots can absolutely fail because if you define all your business requirements and you build the software, deploy it to the pilot location, and people can't use it, it's not supporting the business, or it shuts down the operations in a worst case scenario, then that I would consider a failure. Yes, you can go back and fix it, of course, but that wasn't the intent. Just because it's a pilot implementation doesn't mean you can screw it all up and have to redo it multiple times. The idea is that you want to get it right, or at least as close to right as you can get. So that's really the meaning or what I meant by that in that video.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. That makes sense. Another question we got was SAP just or are they, if they're still implementing, are they just completely the wrong fit, or is it just that they need to do things in a different approach maybe? And what would that different approach look like was the question.
Yeah, that's a good question too. I mean, I don't know enough about the U.S. Navy's specific business requirements and the priorities and all that stuff. Just to be clear, as a disclaimer, U.S. Navy is not a client of Third Stage Consulting. I don't have direct implementation experience. That video and the case study behind it is all pulled from public information. So I base that on different oversight reports that the U.S. government had done on that implementation and other sources. But as far as whether or not S4HANA is the right fit, honestly, I don't know that there is a software that's the right fit for the U.S. Navy, just because it's such a huge military organization with what I would suspect are a lot of legacy processes and distinct way of doing business that's going to be really hard to change. And it's going to be really hard to introduce a standard business process or set of business processes. And it's going to take time to go through that change. So if I were to speculate here or give you my suspicion or hypothesis, I'd say S4HANA is probably fine, or as good of a fit as you're going to find in the industry. You could argue that maybe Oracle Fusion Cloud's a better fit, or maybe Microsoft Dynamics or some other system could be a better fit, maybe. But I think the bigger problem is you're dealing with a massive government organization that's really hard to change. It's really hard to get the business processes nailed down. It's hard to get alignment and that sort of thing. So I imagine there's a lot of alignment issues and getting people on the same page and defining what you want to be when you grow up. A lot of that kind of stuff that has nothing to do with S4HANA or with SAP as a product. That's probably the bigger question or challenge I would have. So I think just, if I'm the U.S. Navy, my recommendation to the U.S. Navy would be spend more time up front with the blueprint. Make sure you sketch out and map out what you want your future state to look like. Have a really clear vision of what the workflows are going to look like, so that by the time you start implementing the new technology, you actually have that stuff defined and you have a realistic plan based on your understanding of what those future state processes are. A lot of times government entities, not to stereotype too much, but a lot of times government entities and some other not-for-profit types of organizations, they just assume this is more of a technology deployment that doesn't require that sort of heavy lifting up front. So I would just suggest that they spend more time in that sort of phase zero implementation planning, which is something that we'll cover in a future episode of this podcast, by the way.
Yeah, that's some great points. Thank you, Eric. And those were all of our social media questions for the day. Let's maybe move on to the article that we have pulled for this episode today that is super interesting. So the article talks about SAP intensifying its focus on cloud customers with a strategic executive reshuffle. Thomas, I apologize for this last name, Suriskig, maybe? Previously in charge of product engineering, will now lead customer services and delivery, aiming to maximize cloud potential. However, this shift may alienate on-premise users who are unable to access the latest innovations. Despite the criticism from user groups, SAP remains committed to prioritizing cloud innovation. I think we've discussed this many times before, but Eric, what do you think this impact on this cloud-first strategy will have on SAP's relationships with its long-time legacy customers?
Yeah, I know we talked about this a little bit last week in terms of last week's episode 1. We talked about the Rise program and some of the concerns that non-Rise customers have about their access to some of the innovation and capabilities that S4HANA or that SAP is developing within S4HANA, but only in the cloud version. Sounds like this might be a similar sort of a thing where it's not all SAP customers are being treated equal. So there's a heavy sort of favoritism towards the customers that are in SAP's preferred environment, which is S4HANA Cloud. So, as we talked about last week too, a lot of customers are opting out of public cloud at the very least, and either going S4HANA private cloud, which is essentially sort of a hybrid between cloud and on-prem. The only difference being it's basically your own instance of the software, but now you're just hosting it somewhere else besides in your four walls. And then some customers aren't even doing that. Some of them are staying on-prem with S4HANA. So, I think the concern here is, you convinced us to buy S4HANA. We just went through an S4HANA implementation. Now you're telling us we don't get access to some of this innovation and some of the capabilities you're building. So I can see why that's a concern, but, back to the reorg, I think it's a good, it sounds like a good move on paper to get some focus in that direction and on that important part of the business.
Yeah, and to your point there, from a business perspective, maybe if you look at it from SAP's perspective, do you think that this move for them is the right move if you were in their shoes, and will it produce that much greater success and growth for the company?
Well, I imagine I'm probably going to have a different opinion than, say, the CFO of the company. The CFO is probably fully on board with this and thinks that this is the right strategy. And I probably would too, honestly, if I were the CFO, because I'd want as many customers as possible in public cloud in that SaaS multi-tenant model to where I'm generating long-term, steady, predictable revenue. And I only have to maintain this one system with limited customization because it's public cloud and it's multi-tenant. So I'm going to make more money on that long-term. My margins are going to be higher. So CFO I get is going to like it. I'm not a CFO at SAP, obviously. So I have a different perspective. I tend to look at it just more purely from the customer experience and what's right for the customer. And I'd say, if you have a product, in this case, S4HANA, I think you have to support it regardless of what environment they're in. You can do other things to try and get people to move over to the cloud version, but hamstringing them or telling them they don't get access to the latest and greatest simply because they're not on the cloud, that, I get why they do it from a financial perspective, even from a technical perspective, but from a customer expectation perspective, I think there's a lot of questionable. I question that. I wouldn't, that wouldn't be what I would do from an outside looking in perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, those are our questions and our article from today. So I'm going to hand it over to you for our conversation for today.
Yeah, we've got a great conversation today. We've got Dave Beldyk, who is a senior manager at Third Stage Consulting. He's going to be on the show here in just a moment. And he's got a lot of frontline experience implementing S4HANA as well as SAP products in the past. He's been in the SAP space for a long time now. He's also helped implement other non-SAP ERP systems, as has our entire team. We're tech agnostic, so our entire team implements S4HANA plus other systems. But we want to hone in on S4HANA implementation, some of the lessons and keys to success. So we're going to have Dave on the show here in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Journey to S4HANA. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Welcome back to episode number 2 of the Journey to S4HANA podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and Third Stage Consulting is an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their S4HANA implementations as well as their non-SAP technology initiatives. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions. You can learn more about Major Tom via the links below, and you can also learn about sponsorship and partnership opportunities if you'd like to get your product or service in front of S4HANA and SAP customers, as well as via some of our other media assets. We also have a Transformation Ground Control podcast that's tech agnostic and reaches very large audience in the enterprise technology space. That's a sister podcast from Major Tom that I host as well. So if you're interested in sponsoring any of the Major Tom assets, you can certainly reach out to Mindy, and I've included her contact information below. So our first guest here, our main guest for today, is Dave Beldyk, who's a senior manager at Third Stage Consulting. He, like me, is a tech agnostic consultant, but has a lot of experience in S4HANA. And we wanted to chat with him about what are those keys to success? What makes the successful S4HANA implementations different from the ones that fail? In fact, we're going to have another guest, I believe it's in episode number 7, where we're going to unpack a case study of a failure. It's actually a client of ours that started their S4HANA journey and actually canceled or paused the project because of some of the challenges they were having. So we're going to cover the failure side of it in a later episode of the show in that case study. But for this one, we want to talk about, what are those themes of things that work well and the themes of the successful S4HANA implementations versus the ones that don't. So with that all being said, Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Eric. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you here today. You're someone that's kind of come up in the SAP community and been around SAP and other ERP implementations for that matter. But obviously today we're going to hone in on S4HANA implementations. But before we get into the discussion, maybe just tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, I did my first SAP implementation back many years ago, back around 2000. And I'll be the first to admit it did not go well. and so we had a bunch of us on that project. That it's funny when you go through a project like that was bumpy, you learn a lot along the way. And usually folks coming out of that kind of fell in two camps. It was like 90% of that crew said, I will never do it again. And about 10% of us said that, I'll do it again. I'll do it so much better because I've learned so much. And so I was in that camp, and several others were in that camp, and several of us made a career of SAP and ERP in general after that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, this isn't one of the questions I had prepared for you, but I'm just curious with your experience with sort of the legacy SAP world prior to S/4HANA, and even just with other ERP implementations. The other questions I'm going to ask you here today, but in general, do you think a lot of these lessons and the stuff we're going to talk about here today, does it stand? Was it true 25 years ago when you started doing this, or has a lot of it changed, or has the world of SAP implementations changed that much in 25 years?
Yeah, good question. But I still think some of it's changed quite a bit. Some of it is I still think data and the burden that it puts on the business, that hasn't changed. I think the change management piece of it, again, I think of the things, the integrators can do so many things and they've gotten better at certain things. But when it comes down to stuff like that, stuff that requires the intimate knowledge that only the business knows, that hasn't changed. You still have, you still got that. You still got, nobody can do your data for you. People have tried it. They've tried to hire that out. It just doesn't work. They can do the technical lift, but what they can't do is do the actual grunt work of figuring and doing the cleansing and that sort of stuff. So, yeah. It's a mixed bag, but certainly system integrators have gotten better, and the technology it's gotten better for sure.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff is still there. You still got some hard things to contend with.
Yeah. I'll be curious as we get to the end of this discussion, and be curious to see how much of this is relevant, would have been relevant in the past, or even with other types of implementations as well. But since you work with so many different, we at Third Stage are technology agnostic, so we don't only work with S/4HANA clients. We also work with other ERP software vendors and the implementations that go along with that. But in general, what types of clients do you see moving to the S/4HANA platform just over the last few years?
Yeah, I would say most of the ones we see are ones that are on SAP to begin with. Get SAP kind of hanging that thread of going out of support. It used to be 2025. Now that's kind of shifted to 2027, and so that's sort of that hanging out there over their heads. So some people are making that move. A lot of people are waiting on the sideline too. They're waiting to see if that's going to shift or not. I don't know. You get the sense that SAP is trying to hold to it this time. I think everybody got a kind of a get out of jail free card when COVID hit, and so they let it slide a little bit. But I think they're looking at, so the bulk of the folks that are doing it are folks that are actually on SAP and looking to do the upgrade. The other group would be folks that maybe a few years ago they weren't big enough for SAP or one of the tier one solutions, and now they're looking at, they need to because the business has grown. And then obviously, if you're looking at SAP, then you're going to look at S/4HANA for sure. So that's kind of the other group. I think it's more of the ones that are in SAP today. I'd see more of that for sure.
What do you think they're waiting for? The existing SAP customers that are on R3 or ECC, what do you think they're waiting for? The ones that haven't started converting?
I think it's a big pill to swallow, right? I mean, it's you're gonna fork out some pretty good money and a lot of effort on the organization to do that. So I think a lot of them are just kind of hoping and waiting to try to get as much out of the money they've already spent into the system. So I don't think it's, they're waiting for the technology to get better. I think it's more about spend and so
we really want to do this right now.
Really exactly. Yeah, I can do it. If I got to do one of these things every 8 years or every 10 years or every 12 years, well, if I can make it 12 years, I'm going to try to make it 12 years. But
well, and there's probably a lot of them that say, hey, I feel like we just implemented ECC a few years ago. And, in many cases, you see clients that just finished their ECC implementation 8 or 10 years ago or whatever. And they're probably thinking, really, it's already time for us to do another. And ECC might be working just fine for a lot of these clients too. So.
Yeah, and that's a tough one because the leap from ECC to, back in the day when you went from like R3 to ECC, that was a relatively easy move. It's a bigger challenge to go from ECC to HANA. That's for HANA.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Kind of a good segue into another question, which is what are the big differences between S/4HANA, the newer S/4HANA technology, and the legacy SAP products like ECC and R3?
Yeah, so one of the biggest ones is the database itself. So the HANA database, it's a proprietary database that from SAP that they built, constructed, and it's built for speed. I mean, it's basically, it's got a lot of in-memory processing. And I'm not a database guy, so I can't say a lot of detail about that, but I can tell you that they have really put a lot of time and effort into trying to take advantage of that. And so they're new, when they go on for S/4HANA, it's all about efficiency and speed. And to do that, not only do you have the new database, but they restructured a lot of the data too. They like, for example, and I'm not a finance guy either, but I understand, the finance and controlling portion of that. There used to be separate tables for that, and you'd have to do individual reconciliation with general ledger. And so it's kind of a real pain in the butt to do that kind of stuff. Now, in S/4HANA, that happens pretty much automatically. So, they've done some things there. Another thing you can do that you really could never do before is MRP. You used to have to kind of schedule that, run it overnight in the off hours, because it took forever and took a lot of resources to do that. And now you can run it right there anytime, multiple times a day if you wanted to. It's because it's a kind of in memory space. So it's kind of cool what they've done with that.
Yeah, the data processing and speed, and especially with the emergence and the importance of analytics and artificial intelligence and just overall reporting, business intelligence, I can imagine that being a big game changer for a lot of organizations that have struggled with reporting or struggled with performance speed of their systems and whatnot.
Yeah.
It also makes them less dependent on, they used to be dependent on Oracle's databases for ECC and R3, right?
Right.
The back end was on, and so now they're not paying a competitor to provide the database structure.
And I think that is not a small part of why SAP decided to do that too. There was a revenue stream they were missing out on.
Yeah. And I get the sense that SAP and Oracle aren't the best of friends, as far as the organizations, but that's a topic for another time, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm here with Dave Beldyk talking about some of the keys to S/4HANA implementation success. I've got a lot more questions for Dave, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Journey to S/4HANA. Hi, this is Eric Kimberly, and I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting Group. And I wanted to take a moment and tell you a little bit about Third Stage and what we do and how we help clients through their S/4HANA implementations. First of all, Third Stage is technology agnostic, meaning that we're not affiliated with SAP. However, we do have quite a bit of experience helping clients through their S/4HANA implementations. We help clients evaluate and do a fit gap analysis of S/4HANA. We help them find the right system integrator. We help them negotiate their contracts with SAP and their system integrator. And then we also help with implementation planning and the implementation itself. So we help mobilize the right resources, make sure you've got a solid and realistic program to manage overall S/4HANA implementation. And then we'll help with the program management, the change management, as well as process improvement. We also provide some technical services around data migration, as well as architecture and system integration as well. So those are just some of the things we can do to help you through your transformation. And if you're looking for more information about it, or if you'd like to learn more, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to just bounce around ideas or be an informal sounding board for you as you begin your transformation. You can reach me by contacting me via the contact information in the links below in the description field for this podcast. So look forward to chatting with you, and we'll see you soon. Welcome back to episode number 2 of Journey to S/4HANA, the podcast about S/4HANA implementations. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with their S/4HANA implementations as well as other non-SAP digital transformations. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions, and you can find new episodes every week. We're here at Dave Beldyk from the Third Stage Consulting team talking about keys to success in S/4HANA implementations. I've got a lot more questions for Dave, so let's jump back into it. What do you see as the biggest advantages for companies that are moving to S/4HANA or have already made the shift to S/4HANA? What are some of you mentioned performance speed and the processing of data, talk a little bit about analytics, but what are some of the other reasons why an organization might go through an S/4HANA implementation or the benefits they might expect on the back end of that?
Well, I mean, I do really think it is. That is one of the main benefits of that is kind of the speed that they can do, that they the ability to improve the efficiency of their processes. I mean, that is to me, that is the primary thing. I think the other
Yeah.
thing is, when I mentioned before about how you've got this deadline hanging over your head a little bit. I think if you've made it through the door and now that's behind you and in the rearview mirror, I think you can breathe a sigh of relief, because I do see, in coming down to crunch time, there's only so many system integrators, and there's lots of customers, and they're all going to be vying for a smaller pool of resources, and it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to get tough out there trying to get the system integrators lined up to do all these implementations, and it is. It was always a concern back in 2023 when 2025 was hanging over everybody's head, but everybody kind of took a big breath when after COVID, and said, okay, we dodged the bullet there, but it's still coming. It's still coming. It's still going to be crunch time, I got to believe. So I think if you've done it, or if you're about to do it, I think getting it done out of the way is gonna get you out of that traffic jam that I'm afraid is going to happen. A lot of people have wondered about that one. I don't know. Now, what's your view on that? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest driver of why our clients are switching over to S/4HANA. It's pretty rare, honestly, that we come across a company that says, hey, we're just ready for S/4HANA. We really want to move off ECC or R3. They might see the value longer term, but they're not. I think most of them are feeling forced into the migration, which in my opinion doesn't help SAP's trust in just the level of trust that customers have of them. But I'll be curious to see longer term how that affects their brand and people's perception of SAP. But I think the other thing too is that, over time, maybe you're not seeing this as much now because because of the maturity of the product, which I want to come back to in a moment. What are the gaps in S/4HANA that might, you might take for granted if you're using ECC or R3. But I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of these companies are still not, they haven't even started their conversion yet. We're 9 years. I think we're coming up on 9 years that S/4HANA has been on the market, and only 1/3
have. Time's flying.
I think this year is 9. Yeah. So that's what's interesting to me, is back to your point about the reckoning that's coming with a demand for resources kind of potentially being short staffed. Between 2024 and 2027 is not that far off. And you've got 2/3 of ECC and R3 customers that still haven't even started their conversion to S/4HANA. So I think you're right. You're going to see a huge spike. You're either going to see a huge spike in demand for implementations, or you're going to see a bunch of customers that lapse, and SAP is going to have to make that decision of, do we really cut off support now, or do we extend it again past 2027? I'll be curious to see what they do. So we talked about the advantages of the HANA database and the overall platform and architecture, with the speed of processing and the focus on data and analytics and artificial intelligence and whatnot. And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of customers are going to want to move to S/4HANA, is because all the R&D and all the emerging technologies and advances are going to go into S/4HANA. They're not going to, SAP is not going to be investing that in ECC, or definitely not R3. So having said that, though, there's a lot of emerging technologies that are being built in S/4HANA, but there's a lot of more fundamental stuff that was really mature in ECC and R3, just because the products have been around for so long, decades of R&D going into those products. And I think a lot of times ECC and R3 customers take for granted or assume that a lot of those core competencies are going to be present and mature in S/4HANA, but that's not, we're finding that not to be true. What are some of the biggest functional or technical gaps in S/4HANA that you're seeing with some of our customers as it stands today?
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting that kind of SAP, they're always kind of looking, they're great marketeers, right? They're always looking how to repackage and redefine their product and whatnot. So they've taken some of the stuff that used to be kind of core and kind of always there in ECC, and they've kind of moved it out a little and moved it into third party provider kind of stuff, where you've got like the CRM stuff, where you've got to go get through Hybris now, and the SRM is through Ariba, and that kind of stuff. They redid APO a little bit, where APO used to be a standalone, kind of a bolt-on, but now they've kind of taken pieces of APO, actually moved some of it into the core environment, and taken some of it, moved it into the integrated business. What is it? Integrated business planning. Yes.
Yeah,
So
IBP.
they've kind of done that, and so they've remixed it a little bit. So it's you can kind of get all the same stuff, but it doesn't all come in the core solution. Sometimes you got to reach out and add some of these other partner things. So I know that's frustrating for some people to have to contend with that, because it surprised them a little bit. You think, well, I'm just going from one version of SAP to another version of SAP, and lo and behold, it's not a plug and play. It's definitely it's a little bit structured a little bit differently.
Yeah. And historically, SAP has always been the big ERP provider that built most of their applications from the ground up and is fully integrated, like with R3, especially in ECC as well. But with S4HANA, to your point, it's sort of like they've moved to maybe a bit of a more of a best of breed approach, because they've gone out and acquired these different products. You mentioned IBP, you mentioned Hybris. There's also Ariba, or you mentioned Ariba as well on the procurement side, Success Factors on the HR side.
Success Factors, right.
Concur on the time expense reporting.
Yeah.
How do these other platforms impact S4HANA deployments? You mentioned the customer expectations may not be aligned, because customers may expect that everything's going to be in S4HANA, but in reality, to get a lot of the capabilities you had or still have in ECC or R3, you need to not just get S4HANA, but now you need to get Ariba, Concur, Success Factors, or whatever.
Yeah.
How is that affecting deployments from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so SAP, they're smart people for sure, and those integrations work. They made sure they're very robust. I think there may be some versioning stuff you got to make sure you got right, but in general, the integrations work. Some of the data stuff, I think there's some challenges there, because it doesn't necessarily map one-to-one like it used to reside in legacy. May not be quite the same, so there may be some little nuances there. I think so. One of the concerns you worry about is you may be having to deal with different partners, multiple partners that are kind of more experts, more of that best of breed stuff you're talking about, where you've got a lot of different resources have to come together to pull the project off, and so I think, to me, that would be the thing that's probably most challenging. And besides the fact you got to write a few more checks, that obviously is got its own set of challenges. But
well, and integration and testing and training, everything becomes a little bit more complicated when you factor in these other systems. And it's sort of like the way they sell it is sort of an afterthought. It's like, you're getting S4HANA, and that's obviously the focal point of what SAP and the partners are selling. But oftentimes, once they understand the customer requirements, most of the clients we work with, it's S4HANA plus all this other stuff you need on top of it to give you what you need. But that creates a level of complexity that, to your point earlier, a lot of customers aren't necessarily prepared for. I'm here with Dave Beldyk talking about some of the keys to S4HANA implementation success. I've got a lot more questions for Dave, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Journey to S4HANA. If you're going through an S4HANA implementation, you're looking for best practices and tips on how to make your project more successful, I encourage you to check out 2 resources that I made available to our listeners here on this podcast. First is our guide to a successful S4HANA implementation. It's a paper that I wrote based on all of our clients that have implemented S4HANA, some of the lessons we've learned, some of the best practices that we typically advise our clients to follow when going through their S4HANA implementation. So be sure to check that out. You can find that in the links below in this podcast. You can also scan the QR code right in front of you. The second thing you might want to check out is an online course that I've created. It's a course that's called the Deep Dive into SAP S4HANA Implementations. And in that 2.5-hour course, I get into all the basics of what SAP S4HANA is, what it takes to make the project more successful, how to manage change, how to handle the project planning, how to manage your system integrator, as well as some case studies from some of our clients and some of the lessons learned from some of our clients. So check out that training as well. So there's 2 things you could check out here, both in the links below. One is the guide to S4HANA implementations. The other is my S4HANA training course. So be sure to check it out. And our goal here is to help you be more successful in your transformation. So hope you found this information useful, and we'll continue on with the show.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Welcome back to episode number 2 of Journey to S4HANA, the podcast about S4HANA implementations. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with their S4HANA implementations as well as other non-SAP digital transformations. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions, and you can find new episodes every week. We're here at Dave Beldyk from the Third Stage Consulting team talking about keys to success in S4HANA implementations. I've got a lot more questions for Dave, so let's jump back into it. So in addition to the complexities that get introduced with these third-party solutions that S4HANA bolts on to provide a complete solution, what are some of the biggest challenges that clients face when they're implementing S4HANA?
Yeah, I guess one of the biggest challenges is, for those, as I mentioned before, I think the biggest number of people that are going there are already on a legacy SAP environment, and you don't really realize how different some of the data structures are. You think you can just, a lift and shift kind of thing, but it's not like that, going to S4HANA. And some of the data is, but certainly some of it. And it's not just I have to map this field to a new table. It's more of I have to kind of rethink the whole structure a little bit. And so now it's that I think people underestimate that effort, and I think certainly if you're not putting effort into, if you don't plan for really a pretty substantial effort to being put in the data, you're kind of asking for trouble. I think that's one thing. The other thing, a little bit, I'm an old dog, so I can say this. It's sometimes hard to teach old dogs new tricks. You have experts in SAP that have been doing it for 20 years, and they'll tell you, I know this stuff inside out. And then when they go to make that move, it's like, oh, wait a second, this is not how it used to work. And it's funny how sometimes it's the folks that really think they know it inside and out that struggle the most with the move, because they're not ready for that mentally. They're not expecting that big change, and it's not everybody. It's only it's a handful of folks. I mean, the finance folks get hit that way for sure, that would be some of the concerns, is when you don't anticipate, you think it's going to be really easy and straightforward, like every other. Well, as easy as any kind of SAP migration can be, right? But if you've gone from R3 to ECC and that was relatively smooth, and you think you're just going to put the same level of effort into S4HANA migration, I think you're going to miss the mark.
Yeah. It creates a false sense of confidence that we know SAP really well. We did an ECC implementation 10, 15 years ago or whatever it was. This shouldn't be that complicated. But the reality is, like you said, it's a different architecture, different database. There's multiple systems. I mean, chances are pretty high that if you're running ECC, you're probably not also running Ariba and IBP and some of these other third-party apps we're talking about. Do you think it's any easier? Do you think there's any economies of scale or efficiency gain or tribal knowledge gain by an ECC customer going to S4HANA versus like Oracle Fusion Cloud or Microsoft Dynamics 365? Do you think there's any material benefit, or in other words, are ECC customers just as well off, maybe considering other systems, non-SAP systems?
No, I do think there is a benefit. If you know SAP, you're going to be, 80% of the knowledge you're going to need is you already have. Right. It's that 20% that, especially if you weren't anticipating that you needed that extra, you had to put that extra effort in. That's where you get burned. So yeah, I think there's definite advantage. I mean, a lot of the transactions are the same.
Yeah,
a lot of the interaction and how it works, and if you understand the basics, you'll be way ahead of the game, having done it before. But if you go in there blindly thinking there isn't any change you got to make, then that's when you can get in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you've got ABAP developers and ABAP resources, or people that know kind of the inner workings of legacy SAP products, I think it's still, at the end of the day, it's still, even though it's different platform, in some cases different systems, it's still, S4HANA is still SAP, and it's still got that SAP engineering and the SAP feel, for better or for worse. If you're comfortable with it and that there's going to be some gains there. But I think you're right, that 20% can make a big difference. And so you just have to plan for it, when you're going through the implementation planning phase, and not overestimate the gain or the efficiency that you might have from having run a legacy product. What about, SAP has recently, in the last year or so, rolled out these 2 initiatives to try and make it more enticing for 2 sets of customers to move to S4HANA. One is the mid-market, with their Grow initiative, where they're trying to go after the mid-market and trying to make sort of repeatable deployment models to get more of the mid-market downstream that maybe historically might not have considered ECC or R3. They're trying to go downstream to get more of those customers or potential customers to convert to S4HANA. And then you also have the Rise initiative, which is designed for existing enterprises that are running ECC or R3 to make it easier for them to make that migration. Do you think this Grow and Rise initiative or these programs are they helping clients make the leap to S4HANA? Do you think it's a good thing, or how do you view that?
Yeah, I kind of wonder about some of that myself. I think you hear about Grow and Rise, and it's not always a tangible. It's not a system thing, right? I can't point to it and say this is here's a new system or new functionality or whatever. It's more of a, I don't know, kind of philosophy or an approach to doing a migration or whatnot. I think on the Grow side, the idea is that you can take a small business that wants to do a very standardized implementation can in the cloud can very quickly, in theory, very quickly get migrated into a solution like that. And so that's the benefit, is you don't have, there's no build, so to speak, and not much build. There's certainly not any special any customization at all. You get you get basically the plain vanilla that everybody else in the cloud. It's a public cloud, so you're getting what everybody gets, that who's gone that route. And I think for some businesses that might be just what they need, and that's fine. But one of the challenges there is, that gets you there. So now if you grow, if you find that you need some sort of customization or whatnot, you're not going to get it from SAP, unless it's a very common thing that everybody in the public cloud is asking for. Then maybe SAP is going to make that available to everybody. But you can't go rogue and go get it on your own, right? So you're kind of in that. This is the box I'm in. If I'm willing to be in that box for a while, that's cool. But so it's good and bad. I think the other thing the other point I would make with that is I mentioned earlier that a lot of the hard lift has to do with kind of the data and kind of getting the data cleaned up and some of the change management stuff. So SAP has made the technical build easy. They've made standing up a system very easy, but the data work and the change management work, that still exists.
Right.
And so don't get fooled into thinking just because I can stand something up technically very quickly that this is an easy jump. It's not necessarily so easy. Now, the one thing I'll say, I'll finally switch to Rise in a minute, but in Grow, it can be very small. I shouldn't say very small companies, but smaller companies. And so the advantage of a smaller company is you don't have as many people to touch. So you can kind of brute force things a little bit more than you can, when you're a really big, complicated company. So, But so it's a mixed bag for me. It's not for everybody. And if you're going to go that route, be prepared to play along the same way everybody plays along, because you're going to be in the cloud, in a public cloud, and you're going to have the same functionality everybody else has. And if you're happy with that, and you don't find, it's not important to your business to have key differentiators or whatever, then so be it. And you can do okay. But if you want to do some kind of technological differentiation, that's not going to happen. Go on that route.
Yeah. It's a great point. I mean, it's not deploying S/4HANA that's the problem or takes the added time or the added risk or the added budget or the added resources. It's typically, not that the software is easy, but it's usually the other stuff you mentioned, changing your business to fit the standard way, especially if you're going with a Grow pre-configuration for smaller mid-sized companies. That's even more pressure it's putting on your organization to change and sort of conform to the way the software works. So you could deploy the software quickly, but you're probably going to deploy the software a lot faster than you can change your business, change your people, clean up your data, all that stuff that you were talking about.
Yeah, you can definitely outrun your headlights, as they say, right?
Right.
Overdrive your headlights. Yeah.
Yeah. What about Rise? Anything you'd add to the Rise program, which is more the upper market, the bigger enterprises that are already on ECC or R3? It's a way to try to entice them to move over to S/4HANA in an easier fashion.
I honestly am having a harder time getting my head around exactly what Rise is. It is a little more nebulous, right?
I was hoping you could help me understand this.
I wish I could tell you a little bit more. I do remember back in the day we used to say there's nothing free from SAP, and so this may sound like you're getting this great service for free, but I promise you will pay for it. If anything, I mean, as I said before, SAP is great marketeers, so they're offering service and guidance to kind of help you through that process of growing and being able to do things. And when Rise first came out, and I still think it's probably somewhat true that I thought it sort of came from we're going to rise to the cloud. I think that is part of it. I think that's sort of where it kind of started, but it's kind of the rising from your business growth and all that good stuff. Right. So it is a little bit more nebulous to me, but I do think that if you go into it knowing that it's not a thing or some functionality or whatever, it is kind of a marketing thing, and if your eyes are open with that and you know that up front and you accept what it is for what it is, then it's okay. You can be fine and do some good things, I believe. But if you're thinking it's this magical, solution, no such thing, no silver bullets. Right?
We all want the easy button, even though it doesn't exist. We're all continuously searching for it.
Right.
I'm here with Dave Beldyk talking about some of the keys to S/4HANA implementation success. I've got a lot more questions for Dave, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Journey to S/4HANA.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology-agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Welcome back to episode number 2 of Journey to S4HANA, the podcast about S4HANA implementations. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with their S4HANA implementations as well as other non-SAP digital transformations. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions, and you can find new episodes every week. We're here at Dave Beldyk from the Third Stage Consulting team talking about keys to success in S4HANA implementations. I've got a lot more questions for Dave, so let's jump back into it. Now, you mentioned before, some of the complexities or the challenges that come along with having multiple systems within the SAP ecosystem and potentially having multiple system integrators. And certainly, I think the really big system integrators, like the big 4 consulting firms like Accenture and Deloitte and those guys, I think they, they're so big that I think they have practices that can, or competencies that can support those other solutions to some degree. But in general, if we kind of look at the entire ecosystem in the SAP world, what are some things to consider when choosing an SI, whether it's one of those really big guys or whether it's a mid-size or a smaller SI? Like, what are some of the variables that you want to consider?
Yeah, well, you obviously want to make sure they've done this before, right?
Right.
And not just
that always helps.
Yeah. I don't want to know that you've done 20 or 200 SAP implementations. I want to know that you've migrated from this particular system that I happen to be on to an S4HANA in the cloud, by the way, and make sure. So you want to touch them all. You want to make sure it's S4HANA, it's in the cloud, whatever, if that's what you're doing, because it's not so easy to you've got to make sure it lines up with what you've got, right? So it can't be, you don't want to be the guinea pig, right? So you got to make sure they've got that. I definitely would be asking them about their data migration tools and their data migration capability, their ability to help you. When I say that, so the tools are the tools are the technical part, right? Mm-hmm. The capability I'm talking about is I have to rethink a few structures. Can you help me through that? How do you help me through that? How do you help me understand? Can you show me give me a feel for how it's going to be different in the future and what I have to rethink, and do you have a way? Do you have a methodology that can help walk me through some of that? How does all that work? I think those are some of the challenges that people face.
Yeah.
The stuff that's not changing so much, the stuff that really is more lift and shift, I'm not worried about that. It's the stuff that I know the underlying data structure changes. I've got big concerns there, or that I have some capability I have and rely on today that I'm not going to have in the future unless I go buy one of these bolt-ons. And then when I do buy that bolt-on, how do I, does the data, really migrate nice and cleanly? And have you done that migration? Have you showed that you can attach all these systems and do all that? Yeah. That's the kind of stuff I'd be looking to ask them.
Yeah. What about cultural fit? I mean, these different companies, especially when you compare a huge multinational system integrator like one of the big 4 consulting firms, or you compare that to a smaller, mid-size, more of a boutique SI. There are cultural considerations that you look at as well when we're trying to help our clients pick the right SI.
Yeah. It's sometimes, if you're one of those big machines that's as you make everything in your organization is kind of this methodical, like I said, this big giant machine kind of thing. You can deal with one of the big 4. You're probably expecting that. You've got some of that. it's hard to describe that way of working, but it is, if you're used to it, then you kind of come to expect it, and it does fit okay. If you're a little more nimbler and a little more flexible, and you expect the same from the SI, then you better line up with somebody who's that has a better fit for you, because it's just little things from just weekly reporting on during a project kind of stuff, and how you do that, and who's involved in the steering team, and is it sometimes those steering teams get to be, sometimes if one of those nimbler organizations, those steering teams tend to be a little more focused, a little more in the weeds, a little more able to have input. I don't want to say direct the ship. They shouldn't be directing the ship, but they should be, at least not. I don't, as a project manager, I don't want them directing too much.
Yeah,
But
you don't want to lose control of the project.
Exactly. But as a leader, they have to set the course for where we're going as a company, right? So, and I've seen some high level VPs in big organizations that sort of, I don't want to say couldn't be bothered, but they were like, that was just one of 1,000 things they had to do that day, and they weren't as in tune with steering team as somebody who's like, hey, I've only got 4 VPs in this whole organization, and by the way, we have a very flat organization, and that VP might only have a couple of reports down, that before he hits the worker on the floor, and so now it's a much flatter and a much more active kind of involvement that you need, and so those. The big 4 and folks are kind of in that mode of working will be very frustrated by somebody who's a big machine kind of operation,
So just to bring this all full circle, Dave, what sort of closing advice would you give to organizations and project teams that are about to start on their S4 journeys, or perhaps they're just getting started on their implementations?
Yeah. So S4HANA is it's a tough journey, but it's like any other ERP journey in some respects. Is that a lot of the core stuff is the same. So if your organization is really good with the processes they do today, whether it's the inventory processes or good data processes and whatnot, I think that bodes well. If you're feeling nervous about any of that, clean that up first. Make sure you get a good handle on that, right? So I'd say that to anybody doing any ERP implementation. If you're doing, S4HANA in particular, that, you want to obviously hook up with a good system integrator, and you want to be very clear about what you expect, and make sure that, like I said before, that they've done this before in a very specific way, right? And kind of ask them about, their methodology and approach and how they go about doing it. And we can help with a discussion like that. I mean, they can sometimes pull the wool over your eyes a little bit, but we can help with some probing questions. And I think that's important, is understand, don't let them get away with the fluffy talk and the nice, pretty pictures and all that stuff. Let's make sure that they are the right people for the job. As you mentioned, make sure it's a good cultural fit. But I think if you've done that, and you've got a good plan, put your good resources on it. It's always, any ERP implementation is you want your best and brightest working on that, because they're really shaping the system for the future. So yeah, that's a lot of that is just any ERP kind of stuff. So I mean, there's a lot of similarities. It's not just SAP 4HANA is not S4HANA is not so different from every ERP that the core principles don't apply. They still do.
Yeah. I think those are great points. And, it's easy to think, well, we'll just deploy S4HANA, and that's going to sort of give us the answers on how we want to run our business. But I think you point out some really good ones, you make some good points, which are that, you want to make sure you understand your current processes and sort of that secret sauce that you want to preserve and maintain in the system, and make sure you've got that clearly identified and documented up front, so that you can deploy the software in a way that builds on those strengths. So that's that's a big part of it. And the other thing too that we found to be super helpful with our clients is to do a fit gap analysis and really know where the gaps are. Not because even if you're definitely going to S4HANA, let's assume, and let's just say there's no question we are going to S4HANA. That's fine. But even then, you still want to do a fit gap analysis. And the gaps are really important because where there are functional gaps, you need to know what you're going to do about it, because those are the things that will create problems during the implementation. So whether it's, hey, we do need a Ariba for procurement because our procurement processes are more complex than what S4HANA can do natively, then okay, maybe we plug that gap with Ariba. Or, in some cases, there's a non-SAP product you might need as a bolt-on, or you may decide you want to customize the software to meet your needs, or you decide, okay, well, we're going to have to change our business and change our processes, but that's going to be super painful, and that's going to add to the time that it takes us to deploy to go through the implementation. So I think that fit gap analysis is another thing I'd add to the list. And also just start off with realistic expectations. Like you said, I mean, if you go in assuming that S4HANA is just like ECC and it's a lift and shift and we're just doing a simple upgrade, you're going to draw lines in the sand on what the plan is and what the budget is and what the resource requirements are that is totally unrealistic. And then it's going to lead to problems later. So if you just take that time up front to plan it out and have a realistic strategy and plan, I think that's super important, especially in the context of this looming deadline of 2027. It's easy just to jump in and start rushing through things.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That was the other thing I was kind of thinking that is specific to S4HANA is reserve your ticket, your place in line, because there's going to be a lot of people vying for resources in 2027. That's you don't want to get stuck with somebody it's like they say when you go to a restaurant, go to one that's packed because it's good.
Right.
You don't want to go to the restaurant that doesn't have any cars in the parking lot, right? So you don't want to get a system integrated that nobody wants, right? Because they're available because there's a reason why they're available. Let's put it that way. So plan that. Yeah, I fear that this could be problematic.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you for your time, Dave. This is super helpful and good to hear the perspective of a guy that's been doing this for 25 years and in the SAP world and the ERP world in general. So really appreciate your perspective here today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Anytime.
Great insights there from Dave. In fact, we've got some follow-up threads we want to pull on and a couple questions we're going to dive into here in just a moment. First, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to S4HANA podcast. We'll be right back. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space. And she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Welcome back to episode number 2 of the Journey to S4HANA podcast. You can find episodes every week at journey2s4hana.com. At that website, you can find wherever you want to listen or watch to this podcast. You can find it there, journey2s4hana.com. You can also keep up to date with new and past episodes of the show at that same website, so be sure to check it out there. So, Darian, we just had Dave Beldyk on the show, and we talked about some of the keys to success. What makes SAP implementations that are successful, what makes those different, or why are they different than the ones that fail or have trouble? What were some of your thoughts and takeaways or questions from that conversation?
Yeah, I think it was a really great conversation with Dave. And I think that one of my biggest insights was not only can you learn from people that are failing at implementations and figure out what you can do different, but you can also learn from people that are succeeding at them and how can you copy essentially what they are doing and mimic it to fit your company essentially. But I had some questions for you, Eric, following that conversation. And one of those was, in your opinion, does organizational change management maybe play into the context of having this successful S4HANA implementation?
It really does. I mean, it's as he and I discussed in the conversation, S4HANA is a different system. It's not just an upgrade from ECC or R3. And certainly if you're using something that's not an SAP legacy system, like if you're moving from Oracle or QuickBooks or manual processes or whatever it is, it's even more of a big change for you. So regardless of what environment you're coming from, it is going to be a big change. S4HANA is a totally different platform, different user interface, different set of workflows and different technologies. So yeah, it's a big challenge, and change management, quite frankly, is one of the biggest reasons why S4HANA implementations struggle. And it's becoming even more true. That statement or that observation is becoming even more true as the technology evolves, as we get introduced to things like artificial intelligence and some of the analytics capabilities and machine learning, all this different stuff that SAP is investing really heavily in from a technology perspective. Great stuff, but it just means it's more of an exponential change and a disruption to the way things are today in our environment. So change management is absolutely critical, and it's only going to become more and more important as time goes on.
Definitely agree. And this conversation was really insightful today. I thought it was really good. Audience, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below if you want to leave some comments about your thoughts on the conversation today. And I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be curious to hear from the audience too. What do you see as the keys to success? Anything that Dave mentioned that particularly resonated, or anything Dave missed that you would add to the list of things that are keys to success? Love to hear your feedback in the comments below. So be sure to drop those in the chat wherever you're listening or watching here. So another great episode. Thank you, Darian, for co-hosting, and thank you to Dave Beldyk for being here today. We've got a steady slate of great guests coming up here in future episodes of Journey to S4HANA. We're going to have guests on to talk about another case study from an actual client. That's what we're going to cover next week in episode number 3. We're going to have one of our clients from Third Stage who just recently finished some of the major rollouts for their S4HANA implementation. We're going to cover that next week. And then in future episodes, be sure you stick around and check out the new episodes as they're released, because we're going to talk about Rise and Grow. We're going to talk about AI and innovation within S4HANA. We'll do another case study from a canceled or failed S4HANA implementation. We'll have a lawyer on to talk about the things you should be aware of from a contractual and negotiation perspective. We'll talk about change management, other case studies. So there's just a lot we're going to cover. The whole premise here in this podcast is let's give as much feedback and direction and lessons to the S4HANA community and its customer base as we can. So be sure to watch this episode or watch the show in future episodes. You can always just check journey2s4hana.com to keep an eye out for new episodes. We released in this first season, we'll release a new episode every week. So be sure to check it out every week. I hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Journey to S4HANA. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Take care.